Imagine waking up to find the financial lifeblood of an entire military regime severed overnight, not by a barrage of stealth bombers or cruise missiles, but by a calculated handshake thousands of miles away. Just days ago, following a nerve-wracking, 300-minute naval standoff in the most vital energy choke point on Earth, the world's two superpowers quietly rewrote the rules of the Middle East. Behind closed doors in Beijing, the United States and China fundamentally altered the global geopolitical chessboard, pushing a rogue state to the absolute brink of systemic collapse. The mainstream narratives want you to believe this is simply about trade agreements or de-escalation. It is not. We are witnessing the quiet, devastating execution of economic warfare at its highest, most ruthless level. In the time we have today, I will show you the exact blueprint of how a nation is being suffocated from the inside out and why the fallout will impact everything from the price of your heating bill to the survival of the global supply chain. Welcome to Political Insight Live, and I am your strategic analyst. If you want to understand the true mechanics of global power before they make the headlines, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and listen very closely. To understand the sheer magnitude of what just occurred, we have to look at the unprecedented alignment between Washington and Beijing. Recently, during their highly anticipated bilateral summit, the President of the United States and the Chairman of China did something that terrified capitals across the Middle East. They found common ground. The surface-level transactions are staggering on their own. Beijing agreed to purchase 200 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft, a massive injection of capital that acts as a vital lifeline for American aviation, while securing the modern fleet China desperately requires for its domestic expansion. But the true weapon deployed in this summit was liquid. China committed to absorbing 600,000 barrels of American crude oil every single day. We are looking at a financial transaction worth approximately $10 billion per month. Let me translate what these numbers actually mean on the ground. This is not merely a shift in global commodity flows. This is a strategic earthquake. For years, Beijing has walked a diplomatic tightrope, maintaining a facade of neutrality while quietly hoarding deeply discounted oil from sanctioned regimes. Now, they have dropped the mask. Alongside these multi-billion-dollar deals, Washington and Beijing released a joint statement that struck like a lightning bolt in Tehran. They publicly, and in unison, declared two non-negotiable red lines. Iran must never be permitted to acquire a nuclear weapon, and the Strait of Hormuz must remain fully open for uninterrupted global commerce. To grasp why this statement is a death sentence for the current power structure in Tehran, we have to dissect the shadow economy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. China is the undisputed leviathan of global energy consumption, importing a staggering 11.6 million barrels of crude oil every day. Until this summit, Iran had been quietly supplying roughly 1.6 million of those daily barrels, accounting for roughly 1/7 of Beijing's total imports. But here is the critical leverage point. Iran does not sell this oil at market value. Because of crushing international sanctions, Tehran has been forced to offload this crude at a massive discount, between $8 and $10 cheaper per barrel than the global Brent benchmark. This illicit, discounted pipeline has been a financial goldmine for the Iranian regime, an untraceable shadow currency keeping them afloat. By committing to massive purchases of American crude, China is methodically preparing the architecture to drastically cut its reliance on Iranian oil. Beijing sits on a colossal strategic petroleum reserve of roughly 1.4 billion barrels, which guarantees their domestic economy can run for about 4 entire months, even if every single inbound tanker vanished from the seas tomorrow. This massive buffer gives the Chinese leadership the ultimate luxury of time and flexibility. They can slowly turn off the tap on Iran without causing domestic panic. If China replaces even half of its Iranian imports with American and Saudi supply, Tehran stands to lose between 700,000 and 800,000 barrels per day in sales. We are talking about vaporizing hundreds of millions of dollars in monthly revenue. For a heavily sanctioned, economically battered nation, this is not a recession. It is an existential threat. You must understand that this oil money does not pave roads, build schools, or stock civilian hospitals in Iran. It is directly funneled into the sprawling coffers of the IRGC. This is the exact capital used to pay the salaries of hundreds of thousands of fighters, to sustain the vast internal security apparatus that crushes domestic dissent, and to bankroll proxy militias like Hezbollah in Lebanon and various Shia paramilitaries operating across Iraq and Syria. If you cut this specific revenue stream, the IRGC's ability to project terror abroad and maintain an iron grip at home begins to fracture immediately. This calculated economic asphyxiation is infinitely more lethal to the regime than a localized military strike. Missiles can be shot down and sanctions can be bypassed, but when your absolute largest customer deliberately pivots toward your primary adversary, that financial crater is nearly impossible to fill. And the timing of this geopolitical maneuver was immaculate. Occurring mere hours after a volatile naval clash in the Strait of Hormuz, Beijing essentially signaled to the entire globe that they have zero interest in getting dragged into a direct kinetic conflict with the United States to protect Iranian interests. They chose cold, hard pragmatism and economic self-preservation. But do not mistake this for altruism. This is classical ruthless great power bargaining. China is actively weaponizing its relationship with Tehran, using it as a bargaining chip to extract massive concessions from Washington, likely seeking superior trade terms, access to restricted technologies, or decreased military pressure in the contested South China Sea. The regime in Tehran understands exactly what is happening, and they know the walls are closing in. In the world of geopolitics, when a fragile regime feels cornered and facing absolute financial ruin, they do not quietly surrender, they lash out violently. And that is exactly what happened. Almost immediately following the conclusion of the Beijing summit, the IRGC initiated a massive 5-day military spectacle known as the Martyr Commander Exercises. This was not a routine training drill. This was a desperate, highly publicized display of defiance staged across the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and multiple coastal provinces. State television was immediately flooded with highly choreographed footage of fast attack speedboats swarming in tight formations, skies darkened by Shahed-type suicide drones, and aggressive test firings of anti-ship missile systems. But if you look past the cinematic propaganda, the underlying truth is one of profound vulnerability. A stable, secure government does not need to instantly launch a nationwide military mobilization in response to a diplomatic meeting. This rapid deployment exposes severe internal panic. The primary audience for this show of force was not actually the Pentagon or the Chinese Politburo. The real target was internal. The IRGC leadership is staring down skyrocketing inflation, widespread fuel shortages, failing infrastructure, and a severely demoralized populace. They urgently needed a theatrical distraction to rally their own ranks, suppress the deep fractures between hardline and reformist political factions, and remind the Iranian public that the Revolutionary Guard is the sole protector of the state. To fully comprehend why the IRGC is willing to push the entire region to the precipice of war, you have to look at who actually holds the reins of power in this country. The elected presidencies and civilian government are rapidly becoming an illusion. Real, absolute authority is concentrated entirely in the hands of the IRGC and specifically figures like Commander Ahmad Vahidi. Vahidi has practically engineered a silent coup, blocking the civilian president from independently appointing his own cabinet ministers, seizing direct oversight of vital diplomatic channels, and securing supreme authority over all security operations in the event of war. The IRGC is no longer just a military branch. They are a parasitic corporate conglomerate that controls an estimated 40% of the entire Iranian economy. They monopolize telecommunications, major shipping ports, highly lucrative oil smuggling networks, colossal construction firms, and the central banking sector. Here is the most terrifying reality of this situation. The IRGC fundamentally requires chaos to survive. Peace is their absolute worst-case scenario. If the Strait of Hormuz were pacified, if international sanctions were lifted, and if the economy stabilized, the Iranian people would immediately begin asking why a radical paramilitary organization is hoarding the nation's wealth while ordinary citizens cannot afford basic necessities. By perpetuating a state of endless emergency and manufacturing external threats, the IRGC justifies its draconian emergency powers, violently silences any internal political opposition, and fiercely protects its multi-billion-dollar economic empire. They are essentially holding their own nation hostage, proving that they are not a legitimate military defending a sovereign border, but rather an ideological and economic mafia fighting a brutal war for its own survival. China, however, holds three distinct, apocalyptic levers over this mafia, and they are preparing to pull them. The first is the calculated economic strangulation I just detailed, the slow, agonizing withdrawal of massive oil purchases that will starve the IRGC of hard currency within a matter of months. The second lever is diplomatic abandonment on the global stage. For years, China has utilized its powerful veto on the United Nations Security Council to shield Tehran from the most devastating international resolutions. If Beijing decides to simply abstain from the next vote, a tsunami of coordinated global pressure will crush whatever is left of the Iranian economy. But it is the third lever that is truly unprecedented. There is mounting intelligence suggesting Beijing might soon deploy its own advanced naval destroyers to directly escort Chinese and third-party oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Imagine the total humiliation for Tehran. Chinese warships sailing right past IRGC speedboats, permanently stripping Iran of its ability to threaten, tax, or extort international shipping. Faced with these insurmountable odds, the IRGC's counter-strategy relies entirely on asymmetrical chaos. They know they cannot win a conventional naval war against a global superpower. Their sole objective is to render the Strait of Hormuz so incredibly hazardous that maritime insurance premiums skyrocket to financially ruinous levels. They want to utilize cheap, mass-produced weapons, swarms of attack boats, naval mines, and Chinese-designed anti-ship missiles to create an environment of perpetual terror in a waterway that is merely a few miles wide at its narrowest point. The economic bleed is already happening. Qatar has been forced to temporarily halt vital liquid natural gas exports. Roughly 230 non-Iranian oil tankers are currently paralyzed, stranded, or taking massive detours, causing global shipping costs to violently surge. But the United States and its global allies are absolutely refusing to surrender control of the world's most critical energy artery. In an immediate and overwhelming display of force, Washington has surged its military presence across the theater. 43 advanced F-16 fighter jets have been rapidly forward deployed to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Devastating B-1B Lancer heavy bombers, capable of unleashing unimaginable payloads, have been placed on heightened combat alert. Furthermore, highly lethal French Tiger attack helicopters and heavily armed American AC-130 gunships have been strategically positioned. These specific assets are not meant for dogfights. They are explicitly designed to shred through the exact type of small, fast-moving asymmetric swarm tactics the IRGC relies on. And while the world holds its breath over the Persian Gulf, we must zoom out and look at the broader global chessboard, because the wolves are moving in the shadows. Recognizing that Western attention and resources are being heavily diverted to the Middle East, other major powers are accelerating their own aggressive timelines. Just as the Beijing summit commenced, Russia executed a staggering escalation in Eastern Europe, launching an overwhelming wave of more than 1,560 attack drones in a single, massive assault. At one terrifying juncture, air defense grids were overwhelmed by 168 Shahid drones striking simultaneously across 14 different regions. This was a stark, deliberate message from Moscow to NATO. While you try to contain the fire in the Gulf, I will stretch your defense capabilities to the breaking point in Europe. Simultaneously, India is rapidly advancing its nuclear deterrent, moving to test its highly advanced Agni-6 ballistic missile. With a lethal range of 10,000 kilometers, and the capability to carry multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, India is firmly cementing its status among the elite global powers capable of striking anywhere on Earth. We are living through a historic, high-stakes realignment of the global order. China is systematically squeezing the life out of the Iranian regime in ways that Western sanctions never could. The IRGC is trapped, financially bleeding out, politically isolated, and staring down overwhelming military firepower. Washington wants stability, Beijing demands secure energy lanes, and the Arab Gulf states are desperate to protect their economies. But a cornered, desperate animal is often the most dangerous. So, I leave you with this critical question. Do you believe China has genuinely turned its back on Iran to secure global stability? Or is this simply a masterclass in geopolitical extortion to break American dominance in the Pacific? And more importantly, will the cornered generals of the IRGC choose to quietly relinquish their shadow empire, or will they ignite the Strait of Hormuz and burn the entire region down with them to maintain their grip on power? Drop your deepest strategic insights in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want to remain clear-eyed and prepared for the massive global shifts coming our way, hit the like button, share this intelligence with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Political Insight Live. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and I will see you on the front lines of the next global shift.